Welcome to Beyond the Board, where we break bread with some of the most interesting industry leaders. I'm Sonia Gafsio-Bliss, and I'm honored to host in-depth conversations with some of the most innovative and impactful leaders in the food industry. I'm so excited to be in front of a live audience today during New York Climate Week with our guest, Paul Lightfoot, General Manager of Patagonia Provisions. This week is one of the largest annual climate gatherings globally, driving concrete climate action through major commitments and partnerships. And I'm thrilled to be hosting this special episode right here at the Patagonia Soho store. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Sonia. I really appreciate it. And I just want to thank everybody for being here in person. It's fun to be in a store like this, and we appreciate your presence.
All right, Paul, so you, this is not your first time in New York for sure, right? You used to live here for quite some time?
I lived here for my entire adult life until I moved to California 3.5 years ago for this role with Patagonia. Yeah.
Very cool. So any special homecoming activities you do when you come to town to visit?
I think you know that when you come to Climate Week, there is nothing you do but Climate Week.
This is true.
Absolutely not. It has been, bell to bell, busy.
Awesome. So you just shared you left New York where you spent your adult life. You moved to the West Coast, to the Bay Area for this role. What drew you to the role at Patagonia Provisions?
You know, I had been running a business I'd founded 11 years earlier called Bright Farms. We sold it in 2021, right as Patagonia was recruiting me, and I had developed a thesis about where I wanted to spend the rest of my career. I'd actually written a manifesto, and I released it as part of a newsletter I was writing about this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And wow. Patagonia's recruiters sent me a PDF they had written, an 8-page document, and they had a thesis that was remarkably aligned with my thesis. Like I almost couldn't believe that, because it was a bit of a niche thesis. It was sort of using brands to create market demand for regenerative agricultural practices. And I had been a big snow sports outdoor guy. It was the only brand I ever loved. So it was a lot of disruption for us. You know, my wife and I both changed jobs. All 3 kids changed schools. But every interview I had, I ended by saying, I am ready to go. Let me know.
It is meant to be.
It did feel like I was struck by lightning. Yeah.
Wow, that is powerful. So I know everyone is very familiar with Patagonia, a super beloved and I would say admired brand. Tell us a little bit more, just to do some context setting, about Patagonia's business philosophy.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that we've been in business for 54 years. We're thinking about the next 50 years, and that's often how we think. We try not to make short-term decisions when we can. We're in business to save our home planet. That's really the mission of the organization. Sometimes people forget that it starts with the word we're in business, but we're really focused on environmental impact in our operations and doing it in a successful way from a business perspective. But it all comes back to that, a belief that almost all products made by humans have a negative environmental impact.
Yes.
And what can we do with our products to lessen that impact?
Okay, so interesting. And then can you give me a brief overview of Patagonia Provisions and how does that fit into Patagonia's larger ecosystem?
Well, we'll go back to that mission. Our founder, Yvon Chouinard, and the food business was his idea, and he's quite involved in it still. He learned about agriculture when he was investigating the cotton supply chain, when there was actually an incident in our Boston store where some employees had been made sick by formaldehyde coming off of cotton shirts, which turned out to be related to the conventional agricultural practices. There was not really a commercial market for organic cotton at the time. But when, one thing about Yvon, and this is really the whole company now, is we just make lists of what we're not feeling good about. If there's something wrong, we find out where did it come from, what's happening. And so when people got sick in that store, we just kept pulling that string until eventually they literally visited conventional cotton farms and said, we don't want to be part of this. Let's create organic cotton supply chains, which was really difficult. None of the supply chain partners wanted to do it, knew how to do it. But we created essentially that supply chain system, which is still growing and in place today for lots of apparel companies. And when Yvonne and the team learned about the environmental impact, the negative ones of conventional agriculture, and the way that these things could be made better with organic and eventually regenerative organic practices, he decided that if we were going to be true to our mission, we had to be in food.
So fascinating.
I know. And the food, I'm going to keep answering your question.
Yes, please do.
The food business rests on 3 brand pillars. Food that's going to be the best tasting, the most nutritious, and with the best environmental impact. And on top of that, we sort of have a couple filters of like, is there market demand for this? And will the unit economics make sense for this?
That's awesome. All of those points, check, check, check. I love that around nutrient density and taste. That is so key if we want to think about changing the health of our customers, and not only also as part of that, the health of our planet.
Well, you know, I'll keep going for a moment. It's the same with the apparel. And for listeners, we're in a store looking at all of our products here. Quality always comes first in the Patagonia way. If you make a great jacket, on some attributes, but it doesn't work for the user you're designing for the purpose they're using it for, none of the other attributes will count. The environmental impact won't matter if people don't want it. And it's the same with food as well. If you make a food product with an amazing environmental impact supply chain and it's not the best tasting product, it's not going to matter how much work you did in the supply chain.
People will buy it once and they won't buy it again. And at Whole Foods, we kind of talk about that as scaling our reach and impact. And it's like that quality is the non-negotiable, because it's like, we want food should be fun. We want people to enjoy it, to love food, but we also want that food to nourish them, nourish the planet, and be something that's sustainable and affordable.
Well, luckily in food, the things that nourish the planet are often the things that are most delicious.
That's right.
So, and the things that are most nutritious for humans. So when we get that right, it's a win-win-win.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So Patagonia's famous model is Earth is our only shareholder. How does this philosophy guide Patagonia Provisions' mission and day-to-day operations?
So for a bit of background, in September of 2022, the Chenard family, which had been the only owner for a long time of Patagonia, donated the equity proceeds of the company into a 501c4, a purpose trust, whose only purpose is to fight environmental crises. So we know now, everybody who works at Patagonia, that the fruits of our labor, the profits of our work, flow into this 501c4 and will go into the fight against the environmental crises. So there's a sort of an added level of purpose in our work. I like to say sometimes there's a better reason to not spend money poorly, because if you're going to take a dime from there, you better be using it well. But I actually think that one thing hasn't changed, which is that we view the most important purpose work we can do in the making and selling of our products. That pre-existed this ownership structure, and it still is what we think is the most important part of how we think about our role in the world.
Yeah, that's powerful. You're sourcing your supply chain. That's great. So what are some of the most exciting innovations you all are currently working on at Patagonia Provisions?
I'm going to talk about, so we have really, really great relationships with Whole Foods people.
I love to hear this. Yeah.
So I'm actually going to, and for the people here, I'm going to pick something up. This is a Patagonia Provisions non-alcoholic organic Golden Brew. So this is an NA beer, and we really need to make products that Patagonia loyal customers want. It turns out that Patagonia customers who are surfers and skiers and mountain bikers, they like beer, right?
Go figure.
I know.
Surprise.
So we combined that with this amazing grain called Kernza, which is replacing wheat in this particular beer. And Kernza has this amazing environmental impact story. So we thought if we could make a beer with Kernza that was delicious for our consumers, or in this case, a non-alcoholic beer, we make both, that would be a real winner. But we also recognize that the beer sort of regulatory system is notoriously complex and difficult. Yes, we didn't think that we could on our own scale up a business quickly and successfully in the way that we wanted to. And we actually went to Whole Foods, and you have an amazing colleague, Mary Guyver, who is in many ways like our guide in the beer industry. And we asked her for help in selecting a partner that we could work with to make the beer. And we ended up working with Deschutes, which is based in Bend, Oregon, for the national production and distribution. And it was Mary's idea, actually. And we went out and executed it. And so Deschutes is making this beer for us with our brand, in this pretty packaging, and distributing it nationally for us with our keystone retailer partners, Whole Foods. Yeah. So thank you for that partnership.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I always love to hear that about our merchant teams. They work so hard to ensure that we are following our quality standards and really advancing and working on our higher purpose to nourish people and the planet. And it's a great example. One of our core values as a company is win-win supplier partnerships. And it's like, that is just a lovely anecdote of exactly what you shared. So I'm sure some in the audience who are listening are not familiar with Kernza, but would you explain a little bit about that grain and what it does and why it's so special?
I'd love to.
Yes.
It starts with a nonprofit called the Land Institute, which Patagonia has been granting to for a long time. Even before that equity donation, we give away 1% of our revenue, have for many years, still do, to environmental nonprofits typically. The Land Institute believes that perennial plants are what nature largely intended and part of the keys to fixing the climate problems. Perennial grains, when they can really scale, will really reduce the carbon emissions and the other problems we have with the way we grow grains in the United States. Kernza it's an intermediate wheatgrass. It's a cousin of wheat with a really important distinction, which is that it stays in the ground for 3, 5, or 7 years. So you don't have to pull it up and replant it every year. And the root systems grow not 4 feet deep, but like 12 feet deep. So we've done an LCA with our partner Planet Forward. On the farm, from gate to gate, we are sequestering about 4 kilograms of carbon equivalents and only emitting, that's on a net basis. We're producing 1 kilogram of Kernza, which replaces wheat, with a net negative emissions of 4 kilograms. So it's a really great environmental story, and it's this delicious nutty grain that makes beautiful, bread and beer and other things.
That is great. Yeah, it's kind of it's a theme for me that I've heard through many of my conversations this week, a real focus on perennial plants, on native plants as a solution to help us with carbon capture. And it's awesome to see that actually brought to life as a consumer product.
And I should add, it's early days. Like the yields are too low right now for most brands to be able to stomach the higher costs. It's an investment that we're making. I went a few weeks ago to north central Montana to visit the farmer who's making these grains, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And he's got this beautiful system where he's interplanting Kernza and alfalfa, and once a year running cattle through. And the Kernza stays in the ground for 5 to 7 years, and it makes his land more productive and more valuable.
Soil health.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful story.
Oh, that is so great. Well, you just gave a perfect segue to my next question, which is that innovation often comes with complex and costly supply chains. How do you balance the drive for innovation with the need for efficiency and affordability?
Well, I'd like it all.
Wouldn't we all?
It's a little bit harder to be us in terms of like making it all work. I think a lot of growth stage brands, which is what we are, come up with an idea, maybe have a formulation, go to the co-packers and say, here's what we want you to make, go source it. Mm-hmm. Our standards don't allow us to do that. So we have to build direct relationships with the farmers, fishers, and ranchers. And we have, in many cases, bespoke supply chains, which makes it more complex. It makes it generally a little bit more expensive, a little bit more labor intensive. We have to coordinate more things. And it even makes it more volatile. So I would say that it makes everything we do harder.
Yeah.
But, the old adage, like if it was easy, other people would be doing it.
Yep. Yep. Is there any example of an innovation that was like particularly challenging and how you all overcame it, bringing it to market? Anything come to mind? I'm just curious.
Well, the beer one was one of those because of the challenges with currencies, yields, because of the regulatory framework. But I think another one, and this is a product that'll be launching soon at Whole Foods in an exclusive partnership, is a wild pink salmon from a place called Lummi Island. It's in the San Juans, and I was there with Julia, who's our buyer, and with Dan Epley.
Yes,
I mean, and I almost couldn't believe that this team came because it is really hard to get there. You fly for a long way, you drive for a long way, you got on a boat for a while.
Planes, trains, and automobiles. That's what the life of a merchant at Whole Foods is.
Well, this was beyond what's required or expected. So they really wanted to go there, and I almost can't, with words, do justice to this magical sort of romantic place, but it's a fishing practice that has been in practice for, they think, about 2,000 years. Wow. So obviously it was indigenous people that did it for most of the time it's been in practice. And you set two boats up, maybe 100 feet apart, with a net, hanging between the boats with slack in it. And they created an artificial reef with nets as well, bringing these pink salmon to the surface. And when they swim between the boats, they pull up with a winch, they pull up the nets. And there's no bycatch because they by hand sort the fish, throw back the ones that aren't the species that are targeted.
Unbelievable.
Which means zero bycatch. There's almost no fossil fuels that are anchored to these boats. And the fish are bled and put on ice immediately, which means there's no really stress in there as well. So the quality is exceptional. That's a supply chain that, and this is like impossible to imagine, the fish, this is not a regulatory thing, it's the biology, they only show up there every other year on odd years. And it's really hard to forecast that far. I mean, it's hard to forecast for everybody in any time, but you get these fast growth products with an every other year harvest and the volatility of wild animals. It is really difficult. And we're actually, we're talking to your colleagues right now about like, hey, the fish were earlier in the season than we expected. Like the numbers might not be what we thought. It's just a little bit harder.
Yeah. How do you even go about thinking about how you're going to market? How would you price that? I mean, such a rare commodity. I mean, you painted a beautiful story of how these fish are harvested, animal welfare, sustainability, low impact.
I mean, I don't even think I'm starting to scratch the surface of what's great about this story, but I'll just give you a couple other things. It is not a very big business. Like I said, we're doing an exclusive partnership because there's not enough of it to really do more than that. The fish is expensive, right? As you'd expect, it's artisanal. It's like hand caught effectively, right? And in this place in the San Juans, and it's almost like you have to have respect for this 1,800-year-old practice. They're having a really good year this year. Mm-hmm. And when I was there, people were excited about that. And I kept saying, why? And then this is the Patagonia way. Why? Like, what's happening? Why? And what they described was that there was a series of salmon farms that had been there and caused like catastrophe after catastrophe. And the state of Washington threw them out several years ago. And the reason we're having a bumper run this year is because of the improvements in the ecology in that ecosystem by having gotten rid of those salmon farms. And so we're actually feeling like, and we're in this business partly to show people that you don't need to eat farmed Atlantic salmon. Like there is wild salmon that we should respect and eat. And this is an example of if it's actually, helping these species. And the Chinooks, which we're not harvesting, are also doing better, which are the most important source of nutrition for the orca whales there, which are in danger. So there's like all these cascading ripples of goodness from this particular story.
And how quickly the ecosystem healed itself.
And we need that hope sometimes, right? Yes, like sometimes we talk about how bad everything is, but the Chinook and the pinks are doing great there right now.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. All right. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I know we're going to get into a topic that you know so much about and truly are an industry expert. So regenerative agriculture. Patagonia Provisions has been a key player in developing the regenerative organic certification, otherwise known as ROC. Can you explain to our listeners what this certification entails and why it's crucial to the food industry? That's a big question.
I'd love to, yeah. So I should say that it certainly wasn't just Patagonia, and it wasn't me personally. The Regenerative Organic Alliance is the nonprofit that establishes and administers the ROC certification. Rodale Institute, Dr. Bronner's and Patagonia formed a three-way partnership in 2017 and basically funded and did the work to stand up this independent nonprofit. And I sit on the board. I chair the board. It is a three-pronged platform, and it's about soil health, farm worker welfare, and animal welfare. And very, very importantly, it begins with organic. So you can't use synthetic fertilizer or chemical pesticides and be part of the ROC community. It starts with organic, and then it imposes regenerative practices on top of that. And it's something that we think at Patagonia is absolutely the key to using our land use and agricultural systems to turn food into a net harmful factor for the environment into a net positive factor for the environment.
That's great. That's great. And how does ROC, Regenerative Organic Certification, differ from other sustainability certifications?
Well, I think it's better.
That's a good answer.
So there are a lot of certifications right now, some of which I think are doing good in the world. Many of which, though, don't have third-party verification or standards. They have sort of suggestions.
Philosophies.
Right, which means that in some cases the word is being used for practices that might be, better than just conventional agriculture, but they're still based on the fossil fueled supply chains of synthetic fertilizer and chemical pesticides. So I don't think the word regenerative should be used in those cases. And this is, this is really my personal feeling, but I have it very strongly. If you just think about what does the word regenerative means, it sort of means it creates life and it would go on forever. And if you have a supply chain that starts with extracted resources like natural gas, which is what synthetic fertilizer is made from, it just doesn't meet the plain English definition of what regenerative is. But my practical concern about this is that farmers who are doing the hard work of growing with natural sources of fertility instead of synthetic fertilizers, and with natural sources of pest and weed management instead of chemical pesticides and herbicides, if someone else is saying that they have this, regenerative product that's grown with conventional agriculture, they're sort of taking the halo away from these organic farmers who don't have the easiest row to hoe. It's not that easy to be an organic farmer in the United States. And so I think we should be respectful of that. And I think the word regenerative shouldn't be used if you're starting with extractive inputs. Okay.
Great perspective. And what challenges have you faced in implementing and promoting certification, like both at Patagonia Provisions, but just even in the broader industry?
You go to certain parts of the country and there's certain parts of the food system where someone will say, oh, these certifications, they're a nuisance. It's all a bunch of paperwork. Maybe even it's a trick for brands to make more money, right? And I understand where these feelings come from. And it turns out it is a nuisance, right? Like it is it's not that easy to be organic, and it's not that easy to be Regenerative Organic Certified. If I live in a rural community and I know my farmer, we don't need a lot of certifications to have a trusted relationship. But if I go into a supermarket in a city, I'm not having that relationship with my farmer.
Right.
And there's a very important signal that the certification provides. And Regenerative Organic Certified, ROC, right now, ROC brands are growing like 45% year over year. The ROC seal on the label is, I think it's causing like 22% growth year over year for the brands that use it. It is trusted by consumers. It is an important market signal. And the whole point of being in the business for us is to get more farmers to feel like the demand is there for them to take the risks and the costs and go through that hassle. So it is a mission in some cases, but it's one that we think is well worth it. And we think that when products and business lines scale, they have to have these trusted signals.
Yeah. It provides an extra layer of transparency, customer trust, like clarity, ease of shoppability. I always I hope that when customers come into our stores, come into their local Whole Foods, that they're able to shop in alignment with their values, whether that's around how they think about their wellness or sustainability or whatever it may be. But it's definitely a tool to help them navigate a sea of products with all sorts of claims and labels.
And Whole Foods has been an early and staunch supporter of ROC, and I really appreciate that. I mean, I really appreciate that. It's what makes it work. Your colleague Jason on Sunday night, I think, said, the top position to be in is ROC, and I agree, and I really appreciate that he's saying that.
Oh, awesome. I love hearing that. Okay, so you all are doing some cool stuff with bison. I think you have a couple new products there. Can you discuss your approach to animal welfare, another element here, and particularly in the context of bison farming, because I know there's some special work happening in that space.
So there's a ranch called Wild Idea Buffalo in South Dakota. I haven't gotten your colleagues to go there yet, but it is even harder to get to it than Let Me Island. It is really rural, and it is really gorgeous, and the climate is really unforgiving. So you can only go certain times of year. We actually believe in this ranch so much that Patagonia made an investment in it a few years ago. And it's growing bison almost exactly the way the bison and the indigenous people would have coexisted symbiotically a couple thousand years ago. The ranchers think of themselves not as bison ranchers, but as grass farmers. They're basically creating the conditions to have these beautiful pastures that sequester a lot of carbon, that improve the biodiversity. There's like beavers are there again, kind of a thing, that improve the waterways, that are gorgeous to see and experience. And we just released these meat sticks made from the trim from these bison. It literally just launched a few weeks ago, but the demand is much stronger than we had anticipated. We don't think it's a little bit like the salmon. We're not going to scale this business very large because there won't be that much supply yet. I hope over time the industries create more ROC bison. But for now, it's just a beautiful supply chain story with a great tasting product that is remarkably nutritious and good for the health of the planet.
Yeah, and you're helping to preserve indigenous practices in actually a viable business model, which is also an incredible thing. So how do you ensure that animal products meet both your ethical standards and customer expectations for quality?
Yeah, so that's not as hard for us as I'm making it sound, because we rely on the Regenerative Organic Certification process, basically. So I mentioned the 3 pillars of ROC. One of them was animal welfare, and there are these 5 freedoms that ROA talks about, and I'll read them: freedom from discomfort, freedom from fear and distress, freedom from hunger, freedom from pain, freedom from injury or disease, and freedom to express normal behavior for that species. The standards also include that it has to be grass-fed and pasture-raised. It has to have limited amounts of transport. There can't be any CAFOs, and they have to have the chance to have suitable shelter. Wild Idea meets all of those, and it even goes further, having these sort of beautiful, almost like they would have been thousands of years ago practices. But we find that relying on ROC makes it easier for us to know what we can and can't do, and have a third party verified is also helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Have you had to make any tough decisions when it comes to maintaining quality and standards, but also keeping your prices affordable for customers?
So you remember we're in business to save our own planet, right?
That's
So the first part is business.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer your question in 2 ways. The first way will be about, yes, some hard choices. The second way I'll answer it is like why I think people should pay more for responsibly produced products.
Right.
So the first part is that I've been in this role for 3.5 years, and when I got to it, we had, I think, too many products, and not enough of the products did everything we needed them to do. So remember I mentioned those 3 brand pillars: taste, nutrition, and environmental impact,
Yes.
and then unit economics and demand of the marketplace. It is very hard to get like all 5 of those things lined
Of
up.
course.
And so we actually had to go through a process of, a SKU rationalization process where we thought we had to have very stringent standards and frankly just more simplicity in our supply chains. We are not that big of an organization within Patagonia. I mean, Patagonia is pretty big, but we're not that big. And so we had to make it simpler, and we had to just be very, very, very rigorous. So we actually let a bunch of products go that we loved, and we treated the supply chain partners as generously as we could, but we had to leave them. Now, the second part of your question, if you'll allow me.
Please.
And this is the exact same philosophy for this ski parka on the wall there, which is that we think, well, this isn't a feeling. We know from experience that producing things responsibly costs more than most of the jackets on the market or than the items in the standard American diet. We think that it's a good idea to pay the reasonable price for those higher standards. Now, with respect to the apparel, I think our customer base has understood that jacket should last 7 years, get repaired, and then last another 7 years. Mm-hmm. You should be able to have the jacket, for your 20s and your 30s, and maybe replace it in your mid-40s. We'll often replace it for you when that happens, right? So there is a feeling that if you can afford it the first time, over the long run, it'll more than pay for itself. Now, I recognize that not everybody can afford it the first time.
Right.
We don't think the answer is for us to try to make less high quality, less responsible practice jackets. But we recognize that there's a problem with affordability in this country. But we think that our role is to do things the right way. Food is the exact same way. Mm-hmm. Like, we think that food should make people healthy, make them feel like they can thrive, and not damage the planet, or at least not damage it more than can be helped. I mean, a lot of products still do damage the planet. And if Americans can't afford food that's produced responsibly, and I think a lot of Americans can't, the problem isn't that the foods that are produced responsibly cost more. The problem is really a poverty problem or an incentive problem. This country creates carrots and sticks that force farmers to make, we think, the wrong kinds of food. These are policy choices that we think should be changed. But in the meantime, we think we need to do things the right way.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you all go about explaining that to customers or like showing them the value? I mean, I 100% agree with the philosophy of like, hey, pay once for quality. In the long run, it not only costs you less, it actually costs the planet less. Yeah. It's better for your health. It's, or however you want to think about whether it's apparel, whether it's food, but it's that's a big tension, I think, with the mindset and culture of consumption that we've built in whether it's fast fashion or fast food.
We had a big motto, a really big motto on the side of a very big building on one of our campus last year that said, "Fashion is none of our business."
Yeah.
And I told my wife, she said, "This is the perfect place for you then." So I don't know that I can fully answer your question because I'm not sure I can know. I do know that we've been doing things carefully for 54 years, and Patagonia never really raised outside capital, which is why the Chenards owned 100% of the company, and never sought growth for its own sake. And we still aren't allowed to chart strategies for the sake of growth. Now, we expect that our products, when they are really high quality and work for their purpose, will grow because demand will be strong. And right now, our tin fish and our crackers and our beer are selling really strongly with good velocity growth at Whole Foods. But that's not the goal. That's like the outcome of doing a good job in those 3 brand pillars. I would say that it helps us that, the annual Axios Harris poll on the reputation of brands, we're always one of the most trusted brands. Yes. We're number 2 this year. Yeah. And so there's some degree of trust that we work hard to never jeopardize that people already have in the brand. And I think that accrues to our benefit, and it's on us to not risk that. And then we do consider ourselves a product company and a storytelling company. So we're looking at the food products of it. If you turn them around, that one says what's regenerative on those crackers there. There's always stories, and we make films and books. The books are right next door to the food there, and we do everything we can to tell stories. But at the end of the day, we start with like hooking them with great tasting food, and we hope they learn more. Because if it's not great tasting food, the rest of the things won't matter.
That's right. That is exactly right. And you've talked so much around how you, as a business, you're re-examining best practices in food sourcing and having an impact in that space. Can you give us some examples of how you're working with advocates and producers to address environmental issues facing the food industry?
You mean like our farmers, fishers, and ranchers?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we start by selecting them, right? So we're not driving into the Midwest and picking the first farm and trying to change them, although that would be interesting too. And I'll give one example. We have a crackers business with Regenerative Organic Certified wheat from this beautiful farm or set of farms in the Skagit Valley of Washington. We actually brought the cracker business over and we acquired the assets from another company, a partner of ours, which turned out great. Like the velocities are going like crazy. It's in the natural channel. It's driving more dollar growth than any other brand. So it's like a real success story. And at the time, it was an organic farm that didn't have ROC certification. And we went to the farmer and said, we think this would be good for you. We think it'll be good for the industry. And we know that it's important to us. And I remember they sort of said, this looks like work and cost. And we supported them in that. I think we actually paid for the consultant that helped guide them through the process. They didn't need to change a lot of their practices. They'd been practicing them for, I think, 3 generations.
Right.
They did need to change their paperwork and the way they documented things. And I think we bore that cost in that case, which was the greatest investment I ever made. Like I couldn't be prouder of that. I love the partnership. And that's, I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's a little harder to be us. Like that's just the kind of stuff that it was a little more cost, a little more work, but it felt great.
Yeah. And it's a great story. And I think we share a similar experience, just role as retailer in doing exactly what you talked about, which is helping to educate and support all the food producers in actually going through the process, because it's not that they necessarily don't have the practices, because some of it, as you said, like this farmer's been doing it for multiple generations. It's common sense for how they operate their businesses, but they just don't have the mechanics or mechanisms and haven't, quite frankly, been focused on the certification. We have one of our produce suppliers. They were in our office for a top to top, and they're sharing all this incredible work that they do, prairie strips along their orchard and everything else. And they're like, you ask them, are you, no, we don't do any certifications. For us, like the land is our business. If we don't have healthy soil, we aren't going to be able to produce this fruit. And it's like, it really struck me around like how innate their focus on environmental health and soil health is to their business, even though they like had never gone through the mechanics of any type of certification. So it's an interesting dynamic at play, particularly with some of these smaller independent farmers.
You're reminding me, by the way, of just how consistently you feel from farmers this connection they have to their land and their care for it. Even the ones that are sometimes doing, they're sort of in a system that incentivizes them to do things that aren't great, they still care. Like, and sometimes they know that they wish it was different, but they're stuck in a system. But nobody cares about the land like farmers do.
That is so true. So looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for a company like Patagonia Provisions or other companies that are trying to revolutionize the food industry?
We're in a stretch right now where our products are doing really well, and they're doing really well throughout the natural channel, but particularly with Whole Foods, which is part of why I'm so happy to be here with you. there's all, I look at people in my organization, and you're either selling things or you're making things, right? And the balance between those is always difficult, particularly with biological processes. So right now, we're in what feels like a fundamental, full of integrity stretch of demand rising very fast, but the fish don't know that, right? And the acres planted takes a while to catch up. So I actually think the next 5 years for us is going to be managing the challenge of are we outrunning our supply chains? How do we manage that when nobody has a crystal ball for demand? Even when it's rising, is it going to rise 3x or 8x? And the difference between even 3 and 4 is a big difference for the farmers, fishers, and ranchers.
Yes.
So that's our fundamental challenge for the next few years.
Yeah. It is a big industry problem.
Well, and I'll even say another one that's related. One of the things that has been really great working with Whole Foods is our mussels business. We were a pioneer in bringing canned mussels to the market, and we did it largely in partnership with Whole Foods, and it's been a great success. Each of the last several summers, except for the one we just had, we had a stock out in the summer because the yields were dropping. Near Galicia, Spain, where these cofradías, these Spanish multi-generation guilds were farming these mussels, and mussels are filter feeder bivalves. They're really great for the water.
They are.
There's no feed for them. Yeah. And unfortunately, a year ago, it essentially collapsed. And it collapsed for a handful of reasons, but one of the big ones is that the waters were just getting too warm, and the warming waters weren't creating this upwelling of nutrients that the mussels needed to feed on. And we ended up having to, we started incrementally shifting to Chile, which is a country that Patagonia has a lot of roots in, and the waters are very cold there. So you weren't having the same sort of problems. And then in the last year, we've had to switch almost all of our supply to Chile because the Galician supply chain collapsed. And literally that industry turned to the government for a bailout and said, there's nothing we can do. This was a lot of difficult work for us, but it was also a little bit heartbreaking.
Of course.
Our consumers aren't necessarily going to see a problem because we've managed to manage that transition well. But there's these people that we were providing, market demand and economic growth for years that are really left out in the cold. Well, not the cold. Yeah. And it wasn't their fault, right? It's a pretty rural, simple place that no one goes to. It's a fishing community, and it's a tough time for them.
Yeah. That is a tough story. So how do you envision the future of sustainable food production, and what role do you see Patagonia Provisions playing in that?
Well, I guess that's the key question. What am I doing on Earth? I think that a lot of society's problems are from our food system. Depending how you count, it's 25% to a third of our greenhouse gas emissions. Nitrogen runoff is causing the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. People living in Iowa can't use their waterways for recreational purposes anymore because of the conventional corn and hog farming there. The leading causes of mortality are related to chronic diseases from what people eat. So I think that that's a good opportunity. We have a lot of room for growth. And I think, we have to end this industrial land use system we're in. I'm going to keep, if you let me keep going.
Yeah, please.
It's not, by the way, it's not entirely a farming problem. We grow more corn in America than anything else. I think 90 million acres. The number one use of that corn is biofuels. We're making gasoline for cars from corn that's made from synthetic fertilizer made from natural gas. It is nothing but a giveaway to a special interest. It doesn't make any sense to put fossil fuels into our most fertile farmland and then put it in our cars. It is truly a nuts idea. The second most use is feed for animals, and by far the highest use of soy is feed for animals. So a huge percentage of our best farmland is being used to feed cars and what I'll call the industrial beef system. So I think that if we have hope as humans to live for a long time, we have to change these things. And, that's the sort of problem that I like to be working on. We're very, very small relative to the scale of the food system, but we're fighting like hell to become a bigger part of it. And we're hoping that we can drag other people with us. That's the land part.
Yeah.
There's a whole ocean part as well. We don't think about this very much, but like 20% of our oxygen comes from too small to see organisms living in the ocean. I think about a quarter of the warming caused by our greenhouse gas emissions has been absorbed by the oceans. If the oceans hadn't played that temperature regulating role, it would already be the end for humans. Like we already would have gone extinct probably, right? And so it's really important we take care of the ocean, which means that the ecosystems or the big ecosystem of the ocean has to be kept healthy. And we are screwing it up in lots of ways. And my favorite enemy in the oceans is salmon farming, which is why I talked about the wild pink salmon. We think that salmon farming, which is only being used in like 5 countries now, it's polluting those ecosystems. It's causing genetic problems with local populations. But really the big problem right now is that we are pulling out huge swaths of krill in the Antarctic and forage fish in many other parts of the open ocean that we could be eating. These forage fish which is like anchovy, sardines, herring, and mackerel, really healthy fats, really good for our health.
The best.
I know.
They're so good for you. Yeah.
And when you take them and convert them into salmon feed, you end up with less food than if you had just eaten the feed before you turn it to feed, and it's way less healthy. So I want to undo that too.
Yeah, we need to teach people.
These are big problems. I'm going to work on them for a while.
Yes, well, you'll be busy for a while. We need to teach people to love mackerel, sardines, and anchovies. It's not a thing. Salmon is a thing, but I love them.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. For our listeners who are inspired by Patagonia Provisions' mission, what can individual consumers do to support more sustainable and regenerative food systems?
Well, I'll start by saying that they should shop at Whole Foods for Patagonia Provisions products. I actually do think that people should think very carefully about the impacts of their choices, all sorts of choices, right? But I think food is one where people sometimes tune out exactly what I'm eating and where did it come from. So I really encourage people, nobody wants to do something that's bad for their health or bad for the health of the planet. But in the case of food, they quite often are. And it's not easy for them to understand the consequences of their food choices. But I really encourage people to learn more. And luckily, in a lot of America, you can talk to farmers now. You can go to farmers markets. You can buy things, that are locally sourced and produced. So ask questions, learn more. And the second one, which might seem a little bit far afield from what we've been talking about, is it is very difficult to change federal policy. And I think our federal farm policy is quite bad right now. But I don't think I can give anyone here any advice on how to change that tomorrow. It's going to be hard to change. It's been growing in the wrong way since the early 70s, I think. But that's not the only kind of government there is. And what I tell people, and I learned this from one of my heroes, Alice Waters, is that almost anyone can have an influence on their local school district or their kids' schools themselves. And it turns out that if you show up with a handful of parents several times a year, you can get almost anything done that you want. And there's case study after case study that a lot of schools right now, or schools that had been serving really processed foods that were being reheated in school facilities instead of being cooked, had a lot of middlemen between the farmer and the school that was manufacturing processed foods, essentially, right? And there's been lots of case studies where schools transitioned to having scratch cooking with people cooking food in their kitchens and not from some big corporate commissary, and their budgets are neutral, so you can actually pay directly to farmers, have healthier and tastier food, and it creates these beautiful demand magnets for local farmers, which has these great cascading effects on local economies, but also just creates demand and relationships. And kids can learn about the farms. You can have, they can understand the marketing of food, the economics of food, which we need kids to all be thinking about. So I want everyone to try to ask questions about their school's food, and when it's not a happy story, revolutionize it.
Yeah. We actually have a program through our foundation at Whole Foods where we fund salad bars for schools and also gardens.
Oh, I love it.
Exactly that. It's like helping kids to learn about how food is sourced and how that food impacts them.
I love salads.
Me too. So I'm sure we have a bunch of folks here. We have a bunch of folks listening that are in the food industry. So whether they work for Patagonia or not, like, how can they help continue to push our industry in a more sustainable direction?
Yeah, I think a really simple and clear answer. I think everyone should try to buy Regenerative Organic Certified products and ingredients when they can. When they can't, they should stick to organic when they can. And when it comes to things from the ocean, I'm a big believer in bivalves. The unfed aquaculture of oysters and mussels and clams are generally quite good environmental impact stories, and I would avoid farm salmon.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Eat the forage fish. Eat the bait.
I love the bait fish. Mackerel is, by the way, one of my favorites. Okay. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. First one, what has been the biggest needle mover for getting more consumers to their purchasing power for regenerative?
Yeah, I think it's this beautiful confluence of taste and nutrition running together. And I'm going to plug a company that Patagonia invested in and that I sit on the board of called Edacious. It's a technology platform that's connecting the dots between soil health and human health. And what you learn when you really study it is that they are often quite the same thing, which is intuitively not that hard to understand, right? If you're using pesticides and synthetic fertilizers, you're not really creating a healthy biome in the soil, and you're not creating nutrients in the soil. Using a synthetic process to grow the crops. When you have biodiversity and bugs and bees and earthworms with natural sources of fertility, all of these nutrients all this life is in the soil, and it ends up in the food that people eat. It's not a coincidence that food nutrition declined at the same time that synthetic fertilizer rose. Right. And so I think that's the most important thing. It's just getting people, first of all, to enjoy the great taste of ROC foods, but to really appreciate that if they want to make good choices for the nutrition, they're going to be making good choices for the planetary health as well. Yeah. And I think that it's hard for many people to say, I'm going to make a series of choices, maybe more expensive choices, to avert a more problematic future scenario for humans. It's easier to say to them, dear mom, your children will be healthier if you eat these foods. And great, if that's the lever that moves us to better environmental impact, let's roll with that.
Yeah, what's in it for me, I always say. It's like
in a wholesome way.
Yeah, in a wholesome way. There has to be a what's in it for the consumer. We can't rely on good intentions or future gratification. So the next question, you have already shared some of these, so I'm going to see if you can even top yourself. But what are some of your favorite moments from your trips in the field?
Oh, so I actually try to visit farms quite often. It is that trip I did with your team to Lummi Island a few weeks ago. Yeah. Like it changed me in a meaningful way. I mean,
Lovely.
I don't want to go too far down these rabbit holes, but there was this farmer who's been there for a long time, not the whole 1,800 years, but he's been there a long time. And he had this stone that looks like a donut with smooth shapes. And I said, well, what is this? And he said, well, this was an anchor that the indigenous people made before they had like metal tools and metalworking.
Wow.
And they would create these anchors. Remember, it's shaped like a donut. It's made of granite. It probably weighed 6 pounds. It was like this big. They would take a willow branch to create a coil, and they would drip water on the stone with agates, which were little rocks that were even harder than the granite. And the willows would hold the agate in, and the rocks vibrating with the water over the course of years and decades, would drill holes into these stones. And they were the anchors that were holding those reef nets in place. And I remember just saying to him, I said, well, this is the kind of thing we don't have today. Like, no one is saying, I'm going to work on making anchors for my grandchildren, right? The farmer or the fisher actually sent me home with that. He said, I have to bring it back in person. And I just walk around talking about it. I'm going to bring it to my kids' school soon. And it's like, this is the kind of thinking we need to do. Like, what sort of ancestor do you want to be?
Right. That is very, very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm blown away.
I should have brought it with me.
You should have brought
it's
it
heavy.
with you. I know. Well, we'll post a picture of it on the link. Okay. Last audience question. So Patagonia Provisions is subject to more supply chain risk than industrial ag. So there's lots of sustainability considerations. So how do you manage through that? And then maybe I can share a little bit as well about what we're doing on the whole food side.
Yeah. So one of our, and this is like harder, I think, in the food business than the apparel business. Like, we talked about getting that balance between, S&OP, correct, like the forecasting of both sales and supply is really hard, particularly when demand is growing very quickly. The philosophy we bring to that is just really transparent. We try to be fair to everybody. Patagonia always tries to treat its partners in either direction as well as possible. So in these cases, we tell everything to our suppliers. We tell everything to Whole Foods. And sometimes it means saying, hey, we're worried. There's something bad that's going to happen. And, it does happen. Like, the salmon, the buffalo, the bison, these are not really consistent supply chains in some cases. And we need to work with, retail partners that understand that. And it's been really a hallmark of our partnership with Whole Foods.
Yeah. Very similar, I think, to our approach, which is we want to be consistent and reliable and approachable to customers, but we also aren't going to compromise. So sometimes that means that we won't have everything in stock that a customer is looking for because something happened to a much more fragile and actually quite, in many ways, smaller supply chain. So we have a smaller pool of options that we can source from. So we're always seeking ways to really mitigate that so we can both delight our customers, which is our aspirations, but also ensure that we are never compromising on our buying standards, which we never will do.
Which I appreciate.
Yeah.
As a customer as well as a supplier.
Thank you. Thank you. What's one piece of advice you'd give to other food companies looking to improve their sustainability practices?
Well, we don't use the word sustainable at Patagonia. We think the path that humans are isn't the one we want to sustain.
Yes.
We talk about impact. I mean, I don't like to give advice that much, but I'll say something that I learned when I got to Patagonia, which is just never stop questioning where things came from. Like, that turns out to be what's missing in a lot of humanity. And if everybody just kept asking, where does this come from? What were the consequences? What are the impacts? It gives people the understandings to make better choices. Because I do believe that almost everybody has good intentions, wants to make the right choices, but they're just not often seeing the data that would help them.
Yep. I fully agree with that. So, well, this brings us to the end of our conversation, Paul. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners about Patagonia Provisions or the future of sustainable food?
I think we covered it. This was really a joy. So thank you for this, and thank you to Whole Foods for a long, sustainable partnership. I'll use the word sustainable in that way.
There you go. Well, I appreciate you. I mean, fascinating discussion, so much insight into the role of food as a part of Patagonia's mission and purpose, and just the incredible work that you and your team are doing. I love it that we've been a partner along the journey, and I'm looking forward to doing more together in years to come. So
Same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.